Is the world real, or is it, in fact, an illusion? This question answered in the current video, according to the teachings of non-dual Tantra. Today, I'd feel like talking about this rather important question of what is the status of the world in the non-dual view? Is it real, or is it an illusion? Well, before I give the tradition's answer to this question, first let me just mention a kind of analogy that'll help you understand, and that's the middle path of the Buddha as he taught it in his own lifetime 2,500 years ago, or 2,400 and a bit. And the important thing here to understand is that when the Buddha talked about a middle path between two extremes, well, you have to know what the extremes are to situate the middle path, to know where the middle path is, right? So Westerners commonly misunderstand the Buddha's teaching as meaning simply everything in moderation, but it wasn't. It was specifically a teaching about finding the center between two extremes. But those extremes were sort of, on the one hand, luxury, sort of sensual delights, giving yourself everything you think you want, and not a good idea, because if you just pursue superficial desires endlessly, you end up empty and without any sense of meaning or fulfillment in life, right? And then other people in his time were also pursuing the path of asceticism, and that was extremely ascetic on a level most people today can't even imagine, right? So extreme fasting, extreme mortification of the body, really, really, truly extreme asceticism, okay? And if you see statues depicting the Buddha from that period in his sadhana, his spiritual process, he's completely emaciated and all his ribs are showing because he's starving himself and so on. Okay, so we would today call this a very unhealthy degree of obsession with bodily mortification and so on. So anyway, the point is, when the Buddha taught the middle path that he taught was still extremely self-disciplined and ascetic by modern standards, right? Because the Buddha taught his monks, okay, you shouldn't have beds that are too comfortable. They should be uncomfortable enough that you're more motivated to get out of bed and meditate in the morning. And you shouldn't have, basically any sense pleasures. You should eat only to nourish the body, not for the taste or anything like that. So anyway, if you look at the rules, if you look at the code of conduct he gave his monks, by modern standards, it's like, whoa, that's pretty hardcore. But in the Buddha's own time, it was actually a middle path between sensualism and something much, 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 much more insanely hardcore. Okay, so that cultural context helps you understand why his middle path was a middle path for his time. And he's not necessarily implying that the middle path is always the best path between whatever two ends of a spectrum you have. Now, let's move on to the question posed at the beginning of the video. How is this thing I've just said about the Buddha relevant to the question of, is the world real, or is it an illusion? Well, it is relevant because even though the non-dual tantric tradition teaches that the world is real, it's real in a way that compared to what people think it is, still seems like it's in fact a dream. Okay, let me explain. Because here I'm alluding not just to a kind of doctrine, right? I'm actually alluding to the direct experience you have when your awakening is thorough enough or radical enough, right? If it's a complete enough awakening, you have a paradigm shift in which you perceive that all phenomena are manifestations of consciousness, expressions of consciousness, nothing but consciousness. All phenomena are internal to consciousness. And since everything is inside consciousness and nothing but a form of consciousness, this world is more like a dream than it's not. Okay. Now, the tradition stresses that the world is real insofar as it's a real form of consciousness, and the actions have consequences, and you shouldn't pretend otherwise, right? However, at the same time, the tradition acknowledges that the status of the kind of reality that we're talking about here is not the reality that people think of when they say the word reality, because most people see the world as an external, independently existing thing, meaning to say they imagine that the world would be there just as it is, even if they weren't there to perceive it. And it would be there mostly just as it is if nobody was there to perceive it. And the tradition says this is nonsense. Like, you're just imagining a static, a kind of reified, as it were, external world that you have never actually perceived, that no one has ever actually perceived. Meaning to say, all that we perceive is a form of our own consciousness, and there's no evidence, and there in fact couldn't be any evidence that the world or the universe exists independent of any perceiver or any perception. Okay, so anyway, the point is not to get into the details of that, which I've covered already elsewhere, but just to establish that in direct experience, in my direct experience, and in the direct experience of everyone I've talked to who's had a non-dual awakening, post-awakening, the world does take on sort of a dreamlike quality, right? You see how fluid it actually is. Reality is extraordinarily fluid. Nothing is really static. There are no objects. There's just fluctuating phenomena within consciousness. Okay, now the non-dual tradition, of course, doesn't teach solipsism, because it teaches that one consciousness, there's only one consciousness seeing the universe of its own self-created experience from countless different vantage points. So it's not solipsism in the sense that we're not saying that what you perceive is created by you as an individual, or is only perceivable by the individual and is dissimilar from other individual perceptions. So that is not the view here, because there's no such thing as an individual. There is no such thing as individual consciousness, really. It's just one consciousness perceiving the universe of its self-created experience from all these different vantage points. And therefore, what's being taught in this view cannot be reduced to the Western philosophical notion of solipsism, okay? Nonetheless, reality very much takes on a different quality with this realization. Like, on the one hand, everything's the same, but on the other hand, everything's different. Because when you see that all phenomena are internal to consciousness, you're not, it really fundamentally changes your attitude to the world. You're not really afraid of anything in this deep existential way that you used to be. You're not afraid of life, because life is only what you are in the form of a kind of play of consciousness. This is very hard to put into words, needless to say. But the point is that the shift into non-dual awareness causes, for almost everybody, if not everybody, the falling away of fear, right? Which is not to say you're not afraid of a dark alley in a rough neighborhood in the middle of the night. Sure, but that's different. You're not afraid of life. You're not afraid in this way that most people are existentially afraid, and they pin it on various things. What if I don't make enough money or whatever? But it's really a kind of existential fear, and also you don't have this clinging desire. I need to get this, that, and the other to make me happy, because you're not experiencing a world of external objects in this non-dual state. And since there's nothing separate from you, there's nothing you need to get in order to be happy. Okay. So furthermore, though, phenomena don't present as independent, external, separate objects that just are sort of sitting there waiting for you to perceive them. Phenomena present as this fluctuating play of consciousness within awareness, within that which you are, and that it's ever fresh, it's ever new, right? Because every time you experience something that you've experienced before, you don't experience it in exactly the same way. And so from the first person consciousness only point of view, you're experiencing it anew. So it's a new thing, even if it resembles something you've experienced before. Nothing is ever exactly what you experienced before, because you've changed and it's changed. And so there's a different experience if you bother to notice. Okay. So everything's ever fresh. And you're not living in this projected mind world in which you think you can experience the same thing again. In this non-dual state that you can't experience the same thing again. It's impossible. Okay. So anyway, the point is, in this view, the world is an appearance within consciousness. It's something appearing as nothing. Sorry, I said it the reverse way. It's nothing appearing as something. It's the no-thingness appearing as whatever is being perceived within consciousness. And that makes perfect sense to anyone who's had an awakening on this level. I hate to use the word level, but I don't know what else to say. And to somebody who hasn't, it sounds like nonsense. Okay, but this is what the tradition teaches, and this is the direct experience of those who've had this sort of awakening. All phenomena are just nothing appearing as something. The radiant no-thingness, the ground of being, the absolute, whatever you want to call it, appearing as the phenomena in the way that it is appearing momentarily. And everything's quite momentary in the sense that the only thing that makes you perceive otherwise is a mental construct, right? Because you've got what you call memory. Certain thoughts are tagged as memories, i.e. representations of something that really happened. And you believe those thoughts are representations of what really happened. And then you might connect those thoughts to present moment experience. And if you have a kind of a routine that you do almost every day for many years, then you can be like, well, here I am having my day, and I've had this sort of day many, 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 many times. But what you're actually doing there is you're reducing present moment experience to these thoughts called memories, right? And so you're missing the actual freshness and immediacy of present moment experience, because you're unconsciously simply reducing it to memory, meaning to say, you're saying, well, what I'm experiencing now is close enough to what I experienced before many times that I'm experiencing the same thing really. And by holding that mental construct of here I am doing the same thing again, you miss the immediacy and freshness. And you miss the fact that phenomena are very, very, very transient, right? That nothing is ever exactly the same, except it seems so when you're projecting your mind world, including your memories, onto present moment experience. Okay. So when you get free of that false perception, then you do see how fluid reality really is. And it's so fluid, and it's such such an obvious appearance within consciousness. Meaning to say it's obviously that. It's obviously just nothing appearing as something in this present moment, that it does take on a very much dreamlike quality compared to your experience before this awakening or before this perceptual shift. Okay. And that is addressed in many texts, like the Vijnanabhairava Tantra addresses it. The Mokshopaya, which later got rewritten into the Yoga Vasishta or Yoga Vasishta, to pronounce it just right. These are texts that strongly emphasize this dreamlike quality to reality, and even though it's real, and in the sense that it's not just a figment of your imagination or of anyone's individual imagination, right? At the same time, it's the shift in perception from what you thought an external, static, independent observer, independent reality, to this is so dramatic in certain ways that some people describe it as, oh, everything is made of nothing but wispy bits of dream stuff. And I'll stop there. That's enough to give you the sense of the tradition's position on this, and to conclude, the teaching, right, that the world is real, but it's a real form of consciousness, constitutes kind of a middle path, in the sense that the Buddha's middle path does, the middle between two extremes, but you don't know where that middle is unless you know where the extremes are. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So the extremes here being, of course, physicalism, which usually includes the belief in an observer of independent, actual external world that would exist just as it is, even if there's nobody there to perceive it. And on the other end of the spectrum, total solipsism, where nothing is real but it's all a projection of your own mind. It's all just like it is your dream. It's your projected dream, and so people aren't real in the way that you think they are, blah blah blah. And obviously that sort of solipsism leads potentially to a kind of, well, madness. It could lead to madness, and it could lead to even danger, right? Somebody who's truly solipsistic might just kill whoever they feel like killing because they're just a figment of their imagination, right? So the tradition is teaching something like a middle path between these. Not that it articulated it in that way. I'm just saying it's useful as a way of thinking about what the teaching is, and that it's misunderstood precisely because people don't know where the extremes are, that it's in between, right? So world is real, but not in any sense the way the physicalists think it is. So ponder this if you like, and have a good one. See you next time. Om.